At 2:17 p.m. on December 26, 1944, Staff Sergeant James Hendrix crouched behind a destroyed Sherman tank 400 yards from the Belgian village of Assenois, watching German tracer fire cut through the snow. 24 years old, 130 pounds soaking wet, the smallest man in Company C. Two 88mm guns were killing American tanks faster than they could advance. Behind those guns, Bastogne was starving. 18,000 men surrounded, down to 1 day of ammunition, eating leather bootlaces. The 4th Armored Division had 6 hours of daylight left to break the siege. Command had given them a corridor 400 yards wide. The Germans had fortified every inch of it. Hendrix carried an M1 Garand that weighed almost as much as he did. His platoon sergeant had tried to assign him to communications, too small for frontline combat. Hendrix refused. He had been fighting since Normandy, 6 months of continuous contact, 0 disciplinary incidents, expert marksman. The sergeant said, "Fine, but stay behind the tanks." Hendrix would be behind the tanks for exactly 4 more minutes. If you want to see how the smallest soldier in the 4th Armored Division broke the siege of Bastogne, hit that like button. It helps us share more stories like this. Back to Hendrix. The 4th Armored Division had been fighting toward Bastogne for 3 days. They had covered 22 miles in 72 hours through German defensive positions that had stopped 2 other divisions. The 101st Airborne was trapped in Bastogne with elements of the 10th Armored Division, surrounded since December 20th. No resupply except what C-47s could drop through clouds and German flak. The defenders were eating K-rations meant to last 3 days, stretching them to 6. Ammunition was rationed. Morphine was gone. Plasma was gone. The aid stations were treating wounded men in unheated basements with no anesthetic. General Patton had promised Eisenhower he would break the siege by December 26th. Not relieve, break. Punch through the German lines, establish a corridor, get supplies moving. The 4th Armored was Patton's spearhead. They had tank destroyers, medium tanks, infantry, and a 400-yard wide approach that the Germans had been fortifying for 6 days. The Germans knew exactly where the Americans would attack. There was only one road wide enough for armor. The Germans had positioned 2 88mm guns covering that road. The 88 was the most effective anti-tank weapon of World War II. It could penetrate the front armor of a Sherman tank at 1,000 yards. The German crews were veterans from the Eastern Front. They knew how to wait, how to aim for weak points, how to kill 3 tanks before the Americans could identify the gun position. Those 2 88s had already destroyed 5 Shermans that morning. The wrecks now blocked the road. American engineers were trying to clear them while German machine guns fired from positions in Assenois. The engineers couldn't work. The tanks couldn't advance, and the clock was running. Bastogne had until dark, maybe until tomorrow morning if they rationed everything. After that, the 101st would have to consider surrender or breakout. Neither option was acceptable. Hendrix's company was advancing on foot, using the destroyed tanks for cover. The plan was to suppress the German positions while engineers cleared the road. Standard infantry tactics: suppress and maneuver. But the German 88s weren't suppressed. They were entrenched, protected by earthworks and the stone walls of farm buildings. Every time an American tank moved, the 88s fired. Every time American infantry exposed themselves, German machine guns opened up. At 2:21 p.m., Hendrix saw the first 88 fire. The muzzle flash came from a barn 200 yards north of the road. The shell hit a Sherman attempting to flank around the wrecks. The tank stopped moving. Smoke poured from the engine deck. The crew bailed out. 2 men made it. The 3rd was caught by machine gun fire as he dropped from the turret. Hendrix's platoon leader was Lieutenant Morrison, 23 years old, 3 months in command. Morrison called for artillery. The radio operator reported artillery was engaged supporting another company. Morrison requested air support. Weather was deteriorating. Ceiling too low for fighter bombers. Morrison told the platoon to dig in and wait for the tanks to suppress the 88s. Hendrix didn't dig in. He moved left along the tree line, away from his platoon, staying low. The snow was 8 inches deep. The temperature was 14 degrees Fahrenheit. Hendrix wore a wool overcoat that dragged on the ground because it was sized for a man 40 pounds heavier. He carried his Garand, 80 rounds of ammunition and clips, 2 fragmentation grenades, and a canteen that was frozen solid. The first 88 was positioned in a barn with clear sight lines down the road. The barn had stone walls 18 inches thick. The 88's barrel protruded through a hole cut in the wall. Hendrix couldn't see the crew, just the barrel and the muzzle flash when it fired. He moved through a drainage ditch that ran parallel to the road. The ditch was filled with snow and ice. He crawled 150 yards. At 2:34 p.m., he was 40 yards from the barn. The problem was simple. Stone walls stopped rifle bullets. The 88 crew was protected. Hendrix had 2 grenades. Fragmentation grenades had a kill radius of 5 meters against unprotected targets. Against men behind stone walls, the fragments wouldn't penetrate. He needed to get the grenade inside the barn. The barn had 1 door, facing away from the American lines. 1 window, 6 feet off the ground. Both were blocked by German infantry, providing security for the gun crew. Hendrix watched the German infantry. 3 men that he could see. They were focused on the American tanks, watching for movement down the road. They weren't watching their left flank. That was a mistake. Hendrix rose from the ditch and ran. He sprinted 40 yards through open ground while the 88 crew reloaded. The German security team didn't see him until he was 10 yards away. The first German soldier turned and raised his rifle. Hendrix fired twice. The soldier dropped. The second German shouted and swung his weapon toward Hendrix. Hendrix fired 3 times. The man fell against the barn wall. The third German ran for the door. Hendrix shot him before he reached it. 3 men down in 6 seconds. The 88 crew inside the barn heard the shots and stopped loading. Hendrix pulled a grenade from his belt, yanked the pin, and threw it through the barn window. The grenade detonated 2 seconds later. The explosion was muffled by the stone walls, but the barn filled with smoke. Hendrix fired 8 rounds through the window. He had no target, just the smoke and the opening. Someone inside screamed. The 88 didn't fire again. Hendrix reloaded and moved toward the second 88. That gun was positioned 80 yards south in a fortified farmhouse. He could see the barrel through a ground floor window. The approach was worse than the barn. No drainage ditch, no cover, just 80 yards of open snow-covered field. If he ran, the German security team would see him. If he crawled, the 88 would reload and fire before he reached the house. Hendrix decided to use the dead ground. Dead ground is terrain that can't be observed from enemy positions due to angles or obstacles. The farmhouse sat on a small rise. The ground sloped down toward the road, then back up toward the American lines. That slope created dead ground, a strip about 15 yards wide where the German crew couldn't see without exposing themselves. Hendrix moved into that strip and began crawling. The snow soaked through his overcoat. His hands went numb. He crawled 80 yards in 4 minutes. At 2:43 p.m., Hendrix was directly below the farmhouse, 12 yards from the wall. He could hear voices inside. German. He couldn't understand the words, but he recognized the tone. The crew was coordinating. Loader calling ready. Gunner identifying target. Commander giving fire commands. Professional, practiced. These men had been doing this since Russia. Hendrix had one grenade left. The farmhouse window was 8 feet off the ground. He couldn't throw through it from his position. He needed to stand, expose himself, throw, and hope the grenade went through the window before someone inside shot him. Poor odds. Then Hendrix noticed the basement window. Every Belgian farmhouse had a basement for storing vegetables. This house was old enough that the basement window was at ground level, a small opening maybe 18 inches wide. Hendrix could see it 6 yards to his left, partially blocked by snow. He crawled to the window and looked inside. The basement was dark. He couldn't see if anyone was down there. He pulled his last grenade, removed the pin, and dropped it through the window. He pressed himself against the foundation and waited. The grenade detonated. The explosion was directly under the 88. The floor of the room above collapsed. Hendrix heard shouting, then screaming, then nothing. The 88 stopped firing. 2 88s destroyed. Hendrix had been operating alone for 22 minutes. No radio, no backup, no orders. Back at the American line, Lieutenant Morrison had noticed Hendrix was missing. He assumed Hendrix was wounded or dead. The platoon had heard grenades and rifle fire from the direction of the German positions, but couldn't identify the source. When both 88s went silent within 4 minutes of each other, Morrison thought artillery had finally arrived. He ordered the platoon to advance. American tanks began moving. Engineers pushed the destroyed Shermans off the road. The 4th Armored resumed the attack. At 2:51 p.m., they were 300 yards from Assenois. At 3:07 p.m., they were inside the village. At 3:15 p.m., the lead tank reached the 101st Airborne perimeter in Bastogne. The siege was broken, but the fight wasn't over. Hendrix didn't rejoin his platoon after destroying the 2nd 88. He was moving back toward American lines when he heard screaming. American voices, close, maybe 40 yards ahead. He moved toward the sound and found 2 soldiers from Company C pinned down in a shell crater. One man was hit in the leg, arterial bleeding, pressing both hands against his thigh trying to stop it. The second man was trying to bandage the wound while German machine gun fire kept both of them flat in the crater. The machine gun was positioned in a farmhouse 60 yards away. Different house, different gun, same problem. The German crew had clear sight lines to the crater. Every time either American soldier moved, the machine gun fired. The wounded man was going to bleed out. The second man couldn't carry him without exposing both of them. They needed suppression or evacuation. Hendrix had neither. He had 32 rounds left in his ammunition pouches. No grenades, no smoke, no support. The machine gun crew had probably seen him approach, but was focused on the 2 men in the crater. Standard tactics would be to fall back, report the position, call for support. Hendrix didn't fall back. He ran toward the crater. The German machine gun swung toward him and opened fire. Hendrix dove the last 10 yards and landed in the crater next to the wounded soldier. Bullets struck the crater rim, spraying frozen dirt. The wounded soldier looked at Hendrix and said something. Hendrix couldn't hear over the machine gun fire. He looked at the leg wound. The femoral artery was severed. Even with a tourniquet, the man had maybe 10 minutes. Without evacuation, he would die in that crater. Hendrix told the second soldier to prepare to carry the wounded man. The soldier asked how. Hendrix said, "Wait for the signal." Then Hendrix climbed out of the crater and stood up. The German machine gun was 60 yards away. The crew saw him immediately. They swung the gun toward him. Hendrix raised his Garand and fired 8 rounds as fast as he could pull the trigger. The on-block clip ejected with its distinctive ping. The machine gun stopped firing. Hendrix dropped back into the crater and reloaded. The second soldier grabbed the wounded man and started dragging him toward the American lines. Hendrix provided cover, scanning the farmhouse for movement. The machine gun crew was repositioning. Hendrix saw one man moving behind the window. He fired twice. The man dropped. Another German appeared in a different window. Hendrix fired 3 times. That man fell back into the house. The second soldier had dragged the wounded man 20 yards. He was exhausted, stumbling in the snow. Hendrix climbed out of the crater again and ran to help. He grabbed the wounded soldier's other arm. Together, they carried him 40 yards toward the American line. The German machine gun opened fire again. Different position, second floor of the farmhouse. The crew had relocated after Hendrix's first engagement. They were shooting from elevation now, harder angle to suppress. Bullets snapped past. Hendrix felt one hit his overcoat, tugging the fabric. Another struck the ground 2 feet ahead. They were 15 yards from friendly lines. American soldiers were shouting, providing covering fire, but the Germans had better position. Hendrix made a decision. He told the second soldier to keep dragging. Hendrix turned and ran back toward the farmhouse. He had 14 rounds left. He covered 30 yards before the machine gun crew saw him and shifted fire. Hendrix dove behind a low stone wall and started shooting. He aimed for the muzzle flash, firing through the second-floor window. 5 rounds. 6. 7. The machine gun stopped. Hendrix didn't know if he'd hit the crew or force them to relocate again. He didn't wait to find out. He ran back toward the American lines. Behind him, he heard another machine gun open fire. Third position, different farmhouse. The Germans had multiple overlapping fields of fire. Hendrix was now between 2 enemy positions with 7 rounds remaining. The new machine gun was firing from his right, 70 yards away. Hendrix couldn't reach cover before they adjusted their aim. He did something nobody expected. He charged the second machine gun. He sprinted directly toward the farmhouse while firing his Garand. He covered 70 yards in 11 seconds. The German crew tried to depress their weapon to track him, but he was moving too fast, too close. By the time they adjusted, Hendrix was at the farmhouse wall. He fired his last 3 rounds through the window at point-blank range. Someone inside shouted. The machine gun tilted up toward the ceiling and went silent. Hendrix had no ammunition left. He dropped the Garand and pulled a bayonet from his belt. He kicked open the farmhouse door and went inside. 3 German soldiers were in the room. One was wounded, clutching his shoulder where Hendrix's rifle fire had hit him. The second was trying to reload the MG-42. The third was reaching for a pistol on the table. Hendrix moved faster. He covered the distance before the German reached the weapon. The German backed against the wall and raised his hands. Hendrix lowered the bayonet but didn't drop it. The wounded German soldier said something in German. Hendrix didn't understand. He gestured with the bayonet for all 3 men to move into the corner. They complied. Hendrix backed toward the door, keeping the blade pointed at them. He stepped outside and ran toward the American lines. This time, no one shot at him. He reached friendly positions at 3:24 p.m. Lieutenant Morrison was waiting. Morrison wanted to know where Hendrix had been for the past hour. Hendrix reported destroying 2 88mm guns and silencing 3 machine gun positions. Morrison asked if anyone could confirm that. Hendrix said, "Check the guns." Morrison sent 2 men to verify. They returned 10 minutes later and confirmed both 88s were destroyed, gun crews dead or wounded. The machine gun positions were abandoned. Forces were pulling back from Assenois. The corridor to Bastogne was open. The wounded soldier Hendrix had helped evacuate survived. The leg wound required surgery, but the tourniquet and rapid evacuation had saved his life. That soldier later told battalion command that Hendrix had exposed himself to enemy fire twice to complete the rescue. The second soldier who helped with the evacuation confirmed the account. Morrison filed a report recommending Hendrix for recognition. The report went up the chain to division headquarters. By December 27th, the 4th Armored Division was pushing supplies into Bastogne: ammunition, medical supplies, food. The 101st Airborne received 40 tons of supplies in the first 24 hours. The German siege had failed. Patton's promise to Eisenhower was fulfilled 1 day ahead of schedule. The corridor Hendrix had helped open remained the primary supply route for the next 2 weeks as American forces expanded the bulge and pushed German forces back toward the Rhine. Hendrix returned to his company and continued fighting. Company C advanced east through Belgium into Luxembourg, then into Germany. Hendrix participated in 14 more combat operations before the war ended. He was never wounded. He never received disciplinary action. He never spoke about December 26th except when directly asked. His company commander described him as quiet, competent, the kind of soldier who did what needed to be done without commentary. On June 12, 1945, General George S. Patton presented Staff Sergeant James Hendrix with the Medal of Honor. The ceremony took place in Austria. Patton read the citation: "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty." The citation detailed the destruction of 2 88mm guns, the rescue of 2 wounded soldiers under fire, and the silencing of 3 machine gun positions. Patton shook Hendrix's hand and said something the official record didn't capture. Witnesses reported Patton asked Hendrix how much he weighed. Hendrix said 130 pounds. Patton reportedly replied that it wasn't the size of the man, but the size of his fight. Hendrix was discharged from the Army in October 1945. He returned to Les Pinto, Arkansas, where he had grown up. Small town, population 800, cotton farming community. Hendrix worked at a hardware store, married his high school girlfriend in 1946, had 3 children. He rarely discussed the war. Local residents knew he had served, but most didn't know about the Medal of Honor until a reporter from the Memphis Commercial Appeal found his name in military records and wrote an article in 1948. The article prompted the Army to invite Hendrix to speak at recruiting events. He declined. The Veterans of Foreign Wars chapter in Les Pinto asked him to serve as commander. He accepted, but insisted on no special treatment because of the medal. He attended VFW meetings for 40 years, helped other veterans navigate benefits claims, organized Memorial Day ceremonies. He never used the Medal of Honor for personal gain, never leveraged it for business opportunities, never sought attention. In 1964, the town of Lepanto renamed its main street Hendrix Boulevard. The dedication ceremony included the governor, 2 senators, and a representative from the Department of Defense. Hendrix attended but did not give a speech. The mayor spoke for 20 minutes about heroism and sacrifice. When the mayor finished, Hendrix stood and thanked everyone for coming. He said he had been doing his job on December 26, 1944, the same as every other soldier in Company C. The crowd gave him a standing ovation. Hendrix sat back down. James Hendrix died on November 14, 2002, at age 82. He was buried in Lepanto City Cemetery with full military honors. His Medal of Honor was donated to the Poinsett County Historical Society, where it remains on display. The citation is posted next to it, along with a photograph of Hendrix in uniform. He looks impossibly young in the photo, impossibly small to have done what the citation describes. The 88mm guns Hendrix destroyed were recovered after the war by a Belgian salvage team. One gun was cut up for scrap. The other was restored and now sits in the December 1944 museum in Le Glaise, Belgium. Museum visitors can see the gun position, the barn where Hendrix threw the grenade, the farmhouse where the second 88 was positioned. The museum includes a display about the 4th Armored Division's breakthrough to Bastogne. Hendrix is mentioned in one paragraph. Most visitors don't notice it. The corridor the 4th Armored Division opened on December 26th became known as the Assenois Corridor. It remained the primary supply route into Bastogne until January 9, 1945, when American forces pushed German units far enough back to establish multiple secure routes. Historians estimate that the corridor allowed 400 tons of supplies to reach Bastogne in the critical first 72 hours after the siege was broken. Without those supplies, the 101st Airborne and attached units would have faced ammunition exhaustion by December 28th. The defense of Bastogne is considered one of the defining moments of World War II. The 101st Airborne's refusal to surrender, General McAuliffe's one-word response to German surrender demands, nuts, and the 4th Armored Division's breakthrough all became part of American military legend. Less remembered is that the breakthrough depended on silencing two 88mm guns that controlled the approach corridor. Those guns were destroyed by a 130-pound staff sergeant who had been told he was too small for frontline combat. If this story moved you the way it moved us, hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're bringing you forgotten stories from the archives every single day. Stories about soldiers who proved themselves when it mattered most. Real people, real courage. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, United Kingdom, Belgium, Germany? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer, you're part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served at Bastogne or in the Battle of the Bulge. Just let us know you're here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure James Hendrix doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen.